No, he didn't move at the last minute. Good evening. This is Professor Amina Al-Din with Critical Talk, and I have the wonderful fortune of having with me this evening two wonderful imams, and I'm thinking that both of you are out in California. Am I correct?
I'm in
No,
California. Yeah.
no, I'm East Coast based.
Oh, okay. So now I don't feel so bad. One got son and forever, and the other one is stuck in the situation I am. We have uh Imam, and I'm going to call him an Imam, whether he wants to call himself that or not, Kenny Solis, who was raised in California and transitioned to Islam from a Latino Chicano descent. He completed his BA in political science and law from Cal State Los Angeles University while simultaneously pursuing a degree at the College of Islamic Studies and receiving a second BA at Cal in Islamic University in theology and law. He is currently attending Bayan School of Theology as he is completing an MA in religion with a focus on Islamic studies and certificate of chaplaincy. He does a lot. But let me say, he is an activist, a budding scholar who has volunteered for institutions like Insight Academy, and I think that's LLOC Dawa and Outreach, and teaching Latinos locally and abroad, such as in Tijuana, wait a minute, Rosarito, and Mexico Massaget. Imam Danny Saldago has a master's degree in Islamic Studies and Christian Muslim relations with a concentration in Islamic policy from Hartford Seminary. He also has a master's degree in teaching English at, to speakers of other languages from Murray State University and a bachelor's in Arabic and political science. He's completed a 2-year Arabic program from Al Qura University in Saudi Arabia. Additionally, he studied with scholars in Saudi Arabia and received 2 high ijazah from around the world. He served as president of the MSA and Asabil at SUNY Binghamton, secretary for YAMO, the first national Latino Muslim organization. Let me say, welcome, salamu alaikum, and it is such an honor. Catching you two dudes has been quite a journey.
Walaikum salam.
Busy men, my goodness, you're all over the place. Um, and one of the things in critical talk, and you can tell by the questions I sent you, is I have loads of things to talk with you about. First, one or the other, I don't care who starts, can tell me tell all of us a little about, um, and I hate to call it the Latino transition to Islam because Islam has been south of our borders, our new borders, and I'll call it new borders because California used to be Mexico, and I don't want to do history tonight, but our new borders for quite a while. So you want to give us a short history lesson because it is imperative. Who wants to do us?
And you want to talk about the East Coast? Talk about the West Coast?
Yeah, that's a good way to do it. Thank you.
Okay. Are you speaking more about historically or
Just a little bit of history. I don't think many in our audience understand the slave trade, and those that understand the slave trade don't understand the religious trade, you know, and sending religious and faith traditions from shore to shore.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll go ahead then. Well, of course, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Uh, First, I think that if we first look at the 1492, that year was a
Oh,
critical
that was
year.
a hell of a year, wasn't it? I mean, just sunk all of us. But go ahead.
Well, yeah, that was I believe that same year, if I'm
Mm,
not mistaken, was the year that we've had the fall of Granada in Spain, which was part of then Al Andalus. And at that time, you still had Muslims living in Spain.
right.
And that same year was the year that Christopher Columbus, or in Spanish, Cristobal Colon, was commissioned to come, with his three ships. And with that came everything else, as we know, the European powers
Yeah.
to the side of the world. And so on the ship, you had people who may have been Muslim, and people coming over, and also when we came, so we have this route. I'd say that I don't want to go into a big history lesson, but
Hmm.
I'm sure you know more than me, Professor Amina. But pretty much to the public out there to know that there were roots in what was Al Andalus or Spain. So we had Muslims who had to go underground, or because at one point they went against the contract, the pact that they had. Part of the handing over of Granada was to allow the people to live freely, the Muslims and the Jews, uh,
Hmm.
to live freely under the Christian powers. So that pact was broken, and people were forced to become Catholic. And so we had,
Moriscos, right?
yeah.
Moriscos?
Well, this was continuous
And
even
I
before.
know I'm butchering the language, but bear with
Yeah.
me, gentlemen.
Yeah, well, there's two groups: the Mudejars, who were from about 12, from about the 13th century up until about the 1492. We
Hmm.
had the Reconquista, this reconquest of Spain.
Hmm.
Um, so the Muslim areas, I think the first part of that time was called the Mudejars, and then the second half was called the Moriscos.
Uh-huh.
So we had these Muslims living there in these different areas of Spain, forced to become Christians. And so this, people underground. So Islam, and it was in the society for a long time, and you cannot erase it, and you still see the architecture. So I say that
Yeah.
because this is one route, and from Islam coming from Spain, and then you have another route, as you spoke about, with the slave trade, because slaves coming from Africa to certain parts of Latin America,
Hmm.
um, where you had different Muslim ethnic groups from Western Africa primarily. And so we have Islam is there, but it's kind of like under the surface. And it was not, it was underground in the culture, it's in the bloodstream, it's there, the Muslims. So, you know, so so what happened was it kind of went underground, Islam.
Yeah.
And
But you know, this
Mhm.
Reconquista was so brutal, in terms of searching out people, paying informants on people to get them, put them in dungeons, and do all kinds of really not so nice things.
Yeah,
It's really over shadowed in many ways, and it's a history that must be known. We'll talk about how I'm gonna get both of you to help me write this book um, later on. But I mean, it is so covered, just as the fact that California used to be Mexico. And then I got to get you to, for the audience, differentiate between a Chicana, I'm a woman's favorite here, a Latina, and a Hispanic. Those terms get collapsed in ways that devalue their political value. But go ahead.
Yeah. So we still have some words like arroz. We have words like pantalon that are Arabic terms in Mexico. Good
Mm-hmm.
Mexicans use these terms as well. and there's still some of that remnants there in whether the words Guadalajara or whether the words that we use and the way that we name foods. So there's still that remnants of Islam,
Right.
of that heritage.
Absolutely. And they're not going anywhere and are accepted. That's the interesting part, is they're so deep in the culture that to get rid of them, you wouldn't know what to say. Not that I'm an expert on Spanish, but they are there used all the time. Now, as no, let's do some defining of terms. What's in Hispanic? How should our viewers learn to use that term?
Well,
Don't
let's,
jump at once. Roll it out.
I'll go ahead if Ken's not going to, Ken. Okay. Well, I think, these terms, they have some value, but we can't. For myself, I think we have to be cognizant of the roots of some of these terms.
Right.
There are Eurocentric terms, Hispanic and Latino, and so it can be used in different ways. So every time I use the term Latino, I put it between quotes because it's like as a so-called Latino. But from my understanding, Hispanic refers to that which refers to España or Spain and those roots and the Spanish language and culture, which is part of the story. It's not the whole story.
Yeah.
But it's part of the story of the peoples now living in these lands, these Spanish-speaking lands of the Americas.
Yeah, a lot of these terms, they have genealogical philosophies attached to it. For example, the word Chicano was something that was established in the 1950s and 60s, where the Mexican people in California, they were like, no soy de aquí ni soy de allá. I'm in California, and they're telling me to go to Mexico, go back to Mexico. I go to Mexico to visit my family. Yeah, I know. And my family tells me, you're American. So what am I really? So they came up with this term, Chicano, which it comes from an Aztec word, Chicano, because the Mexico used to be, they used to have the X was a cha sound. Mexico, Mexico. So they took that and they made it into Chicano. And this is the identity that was developed, the term that was developed. And throughout history, throughout years, it's changed. It's changed and it's been attached to different philosophies, liberalism, and other philosophies that are attached with it. And it's lost itself from the movement, from the Chicano movement, from the Aslan movement. It's become something totally different.
Wow. So when people are dumping everything into the pot called Latino, we're Xing out a lot of people. I think the critical thing is we got to do this book, guys, because when migrants hit, our crazy news, it became, oh, people are coming from El Salvador and they're coming from Guatemala, and Americans are saying, where is that? And then as people began to Peru and this and that and the other, there wasn't a clear understanding of, and I know you all don't really want to do history, and we'll get into the Islam stuff, but this is really the Islam stuff too, of the brutal regimes of Pinochet and all these other knuckleheads that were leading governments down there and really crucifying people, right? Pursuing something. But with those regimes, and I just got through watching several movies on Argentina and the disappeared, you have to contextualize who are the people coming, and some of those people coming are Muslim, you know, as you know, Mexico gets the American version of itself, which means we're going to focus on whatever violence there is in Mexico. You know, skip Chicago. And go to Mexico. You know, I mean, these people are violent, they're out of their minds, and etc. So when you talk about quote unquote, I'm putting the parentheses there, Danny, quote unquote Latinos who are Muslim coming from Mexico. Well, now I get to call them rapists and violence and this and that and the other. They get thrown into a brown pot. Like the young man, I'm not sure, and you can tell me, that was hung or there was an attempted hanging recently. Do you know what I'm saying? They're caught up in a whole other schema of violence. So I'm gonna let you all lead it. 'Cause I'm telling you, I got 9,006 questions.
If I may, I don't mean to digress, but or
Please
to
digress.
no, or to go back, but you know, if we sort of moved on, but I think the question Latino hasn't been properly defined, and that itself, you know, from what I know in the 1800s, Napoleon's brother had come to Mexico, and
You mean he had the nerve to have a brother? He wasn't bad enough. He had to have a brother too. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
and from what I know, he tried to, you know, say, look, he kind of coined this term Latino, you know,
Really?
being that Spanish comes from a Latin origin and French as well, and so, you know, I guess since then, you know, kind of
Wow.
so stuck, and so you know, so he was trying to unify, but you know, as was spoken already, we can't forget about, you know, the Aztecs and different folks who were and still are living in many parts of Latin America. You know, so
Yeah.
when I say Latino, it's more comprehensive to say probably something like, you know, the Indio Afro Latino, you know, to speak about
Oh, I
the
like
whole,
that.
you know, as a whole, the
Yeah.
people there, you know, and that's probably even, you know, it could probably be more expansive than that. So,
But I
but
like that because it's important to name a thing what it is.
so
You know what I'm saying? You get a greater appreciation. I see Imam Solis chomping at the bit over there.
I think one thing that's not being talked about in regards to identity is the Mexican community, the Latino community. It's a baby. It's a baby in entering Islam. You every day you have converts converting to Islam in Rosarito and Tijuana and Guadalajara, and there's still that question of, can I be Latino or be Mexican and still be Muslim? What does that mean
Well, it
for
depends on
me?
what. Don't you
How
think
can I interact
it depends
with my
on?
culture
Mhm.
in the Quran?
But don't you think that depends on?
So a
I think
highly important article
it
is
means
here.
keeping your identity. You know, you don't want to be an Arab, Indian,
Yes, but
African, whatever. Well, I'm gonna get this. Hey, baby, I'm gonna get this list together here. But you understand what I'm saying? You can't be somebody else's culture. You have to be your own and bring that richness to the palette that is Islam writ
mhm.
large. And I can see it, but I don't see. Um,
Yes.
I don't. Wait, tell me more about this identity dilemma. I'm not giving up learning how to do the salsa, but tell me more about this. That's me. Uh,
Uh,
Identity issue.
yeah.
I think I can't hear. Is it just me or?
What's happening is that there's a new need for a new pedagogy, a new curriculum of Islamic studies. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Nothing.
Now you went
You can
away.
hear me. It's good.
Now.
So what I was saying is, you can hear me. Yeah. So there's a need for a new pedagogy. It, there's
I
a
don't
there's
know
a new
why
need
we're
for
losing you.
there's a need for a pedagogy, a new pedagogy of Islamic studies in the lands of Mexico and the lands of Tijuana and Rosarito. Hello there. Can you hear me?
Yes. Something is going on, and it may be the
Is
weather.
that better?
We'll work through it. Yes.
Assalamualaikum.
Alaikum salam. So when you say
Yeah.
new pedagogy, meaning a new way of teaching,
Can you hear me?
yes. Can you hear me? Exactly what are you saying?
Yes. Can you hear me? Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay. When he's talking about, while he's straightening that out, a new pedagogy, what are we talking about here, Danny?
I, okay. Yeah. I can't answer for him, but I can maybe give my take on
Yeah.
that. I guess you spoke about. I guess going back to the last thing we spoke about is Latin America. What's the area known as Latin America has been the U.S.'s backyard, so to speak, and we've the political situation there, the Monroe Doctrine, and so many people have gone to different philosophies, different ideologies, looking for solutions for their their life and their well being. And I think for one of the first groups that had come to Islam on the East Coast had come out of different what would you say different movements and Puerto Rican
Mhm.
Latino movements,
Mhm.
such as the Young Lords Party,
Right.
um, and so some of the first people who had accepted Islam had, they were looking at Islam as a sort of, what would you say, like, I guess you could say like some sort of like liberation theology. You
Okay.
could say, I mean, before there had been a few Muslims, but those that were trying to merge their culture and Islam and seeing the connections and trying to bridge the gap. Um, they were trying, they were trying to do that. And some of those, one of the first organizations that had come together collectively was the Alianza Islamica. But it will let
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
uh, Kenny continue what he was saying.
We're back to pedagogy.
Yeah.
We're having difficulty, technical audio difficulty.
Assalamualaikum. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. So in the lands of Mexico and South America, there's a need for pedagogy. Hello? Assalamualaikum.
So, what is this new? Oops, he's gone again. So, in needing a new pedagogy, a new curriculum for how people can come, African Americans have the same problem because many of us want to jump over into somebody else's culture and just play pretend we weren't black. But that's a different story. Long story. Um, Islam comes to cultures, and it does not, should not, is not designed to change the people away from their tribe. It is to take the things that don't fit the Islamic model out, put the right stuff in, and leave the things that are good and moral and right and just right there.
Yeah.
So I think, in this book that I'm getting ready to uh, drag you all kicking and screaming into, amongst the many things that you have to do, we need to put some of those things together. I'm thinking of a colleague of mine, Christian, where is he from? Brazil, who took it upon himself to write about Muslims in Brazil. And we used to have these long talks because I'm saying uh, he was having a problem. Well, can I be Christian and write about Muslims in Brazil? Well, if nobody else is writing, you give us something to either rebuke or say, okay, we'll take the good out of that. But we got to get something out there for, especially for people teaching about Islam in America,
Yeah.
because it's got to include that diversity. It's got to talk about the people who are continuously transitioning into Islam with all of the herky jerky kinds of things that that brings. And we've got to figure out a way to talk to each other, because what's being brought here is a different set of stuff. I mean, into the Islamic family. And it's a history and good stuff that has to be acknowledged. And I see he's still, the weather, I don't know about California, but in LA, whose weather I totally envy. But out here, there are storms right now. So we're having a lot of difficulty, which means that I have to get you guys together again. So all that we don't get done tonight, we'll do in the future. But I'm going to leave this up so that we go on. But how has in California the Muslim community, the Spanish speaking Muslim community, weathered the pandemic and the protests?
Mhm. Well, I can't really speak about in California being from the East Coast, but
Oh, wait a minute. I got my people mixed up. Sorry.
no,
Well,
no,
it's the Latino community. Not, I don't want to use Latino because then I got to do the quote thing. How is the Spanish speaking community weathering the pandemic and the protests? They're one of the minority communities that has been hardest hit.
yeah. Well, I know in my family alone, I had my sister. She had gotten the COVID-19, and thank God she's gotten over it.
Oh, alhamdulillah.
Yeah. But I think, and I know other people who have gotten it within the Latino community. Alhamdulillah, they've recovered. There were some sisters I know in the Union City area, New Jersey.
Mhm.
And, so we had different cases that I know of personally, of people who have
But
gotten.
in the Spanish speaking community on both coasts, the lack of health care, the lack of access to health care, uh, the threat of deportation for undocumented, this darn temporary DACA mess. I'll just smile because I don't want to say anything not publishable here. Um, and it's temporary. It keeps people's anxiety levels sky high, right? Uh, but I know that the uh, community suffered lack of hospitals, lack of empathy on the parts of physicians and nurses, just name it, not being able to get care. And Imam Solis, we're going to come back to the issue of pedagogy now that you're back with us. So I want to talk a little bit about that because ICE really did not stop its searches, and the fact that a pandemic made people shelter in place made it worse.
Mhm. So now the question in regards to that, as we think about should we protest or should we not protest? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
my parents and my in-laws, they both don't have health insurance, so it would be difficult to put them at risk. So
Right.
the millennials are the driving force for change, because we need to keep them safe. My wife's uncle, he got COVID, and he was seriously
Affected. Darn it. Okay, I don't know. Yeah, I think that those stories have to be included um, as we detail. Uh, yeah. Um, but I think that they've been overlooked on the East Coast, just as I'm here in Chicago. Um, Muslims uh, kind of took care of their own ethnic group. I can't say how much that infuriated me because some ethnic groups had more resources and more context than others. Um, the fact that we didn't, even in a pandemic, come to see a need to collectively look at our resources, not leave anybody out, wherever it was we were, bothered me tremendously. Um, and I think we need to interrogate that because as COVID revealed, it was housing, it was education, it was healthcare, it was finances, it was unemployment, it was all of these things coming to sit in laps all at one time, and it was like, oh my God, what do I do here? So, what mental health resources were Spanish speaking communities able to come up with out on the East Coast?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's I don't really know. I could just speak for my personal experiences that I know because I don't, that's not really my area of expertise as far as the
No, I don't
healthcare.
want you to be the expert, but you saw people
Yeah,
going down, coming up, having nervous breakdowns.
yeah, but I think like my sister, for example, she works in Perth Amboy, New Jersey, and it's a very heavily so-called Latino area, and there's so there she you know as far as the resources, I think there could be more resources on the ground because she herself got, as I said already, she got the COVID-19, and it was right in the office from people coming in, and it wasn't even from the patient directly.
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
it's from the patient who gave it to her, the coworker who gave it to her. So that was how and so but but we see the death and the death toll rising. We see people denying it. We see people trying to I don't know. People trying to not take precautions, and I think that much more resources could be thrown in this area. As far as and there's those that are more. I would say those that are more vulnerable. We should be helping them out. That's what I feel. I know a few years ago, there was talk about the compassionate conservative or compassionate conservatism, but I don't know what happened to that. at least as an idea.
It went the way of those treaties. It
Yeah, I don't know.
followed those treaties to the
Yeah,
trash can.
I
Uh-huh.
don't know. At least as a slogan, at least, or something. But I don't. I don't know. We should be compassionate. Every person should be compassionate. Every person and every Muslim, every human being. This should be compassion. Should be compassion. Allah is Rahman. You know. So
Well,
yeah,
how do you let me do my critical part. As men of faith, who have gone off and studied somebody else's version of Islam, bear with me here. How do you take what you know from a faith position and what you've learned to teach in your communities? It's one thing to say we should have faith, we should have compassion. Allah says da 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 da. But then when you don't see people acting in that way, what do you do?
I've been speaking too much here, so hopefully
Huh?
we get. I've been speaking too much here. Hopefully we get Imam Kenny here speaking. Inshallah, hopefully.
I think there needs to be a renovation of pedagogy, like I was speaking before.
Right?
Um, an article that needs to be taught everywhere is The Culture Imperative by Dr. Abdullah Farouk. which
Can
talk-
you say that slowly so we can get it on our school line so that our viewers can get it?
Yes, so the article, the journal, academic journal article that needs to be taught and translated is The Culture Imperative by Dr. Abdullah Farouk. It's a highly
Is
important piece. And this is something that's needed in our communities. As I go to Mexico, there's a conflict of, are certain things acceptable in the culture? Is it okay to wear a sombrero? Is it okay to wear botas? Is it okay? There's a lot of questions that need to be answered. El Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead. What do we do with that? These are these
I
questions
have
that
to admit that scared me. I said, "You doing what?" Oh, and then I realized the importance with the ancestral link,
yeah,
and some of the stuff went away. And how, if I can dig up an old Arab sheikh to study, then I have to think about how cultures revere and transmit through a reckoning with ancestors,
hmm
inside the family and inside the community. So I think that perhaps that's one of those things that before just people out of hand dismiss it, see what can be done with it,
yes.
you
Yeah.
know?
And I think what's also needed as a teacher myself is a Socratic method, question and answer.
I love it. I love it. I love it.
You ask them a question, what is culture to you?
Hmm.
And they answer and they grasp the knowledge and they come up with their own answers.
Hmm.
Instead of
Hmm.
having this rote memorization
Right.
that you see with the Greeks, with the Romans, there
With
needs to
the
be
Arabs.
a slightly different pedagogy and for these different communities.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. It's one of the things that is missing in Islamic studies
Yeah.
is critical thought.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember when I was in graduate school, it became a real fight because I had to take on extra courses to get courses in critical thought, to see what I could do with them inside of Islamic studies, which is all rote memory.
Mhm.
And people like uh, Imam Abdul Farouk he's wrestled with the same kinds of things that all of us did, in these, oh my God, it took me 10 years to do Islamic studies, because you're memorizing, but there's no question and answer. But I think it's sneaking up on, but that's not our problem. Our problem is people coming from very old cultures who have these things in there, and it becomes, how can I be Muslim and not lose my cultural identity over to something else,
Mhm.
even though the something else doesn't want you in their cultural identity.
Mm. If I may,
I have.
um,
Hmm.
I just want to say that I think I had a similar discussion, maybe not exactly the same, but the other day on Facebook would and I think the two areas that really like you said, and I was thinking the same thing about critical thought is learning fiqh and the usul of fiqh and knowing that well, and that's and that and I forgot which other area I said, or knowing the beliefs, the Muslim beliefs, knowing that well, then you'll be able to or make those decisions. We don't need to be just cutting and pasting what scholars, other scholars, respectfully, living here or living overseas now or in the past have said on things. We should be creating a generation, people who are able to think and take the sources and
Absolutely.
produce fatawa, produce answers to questions, and cultural in the cultural context. I said this to someone the other day that it says in books of fiqh that the person of or Rasul of fiqh, the person that gives the fatwa has to know the culture. You have to know the urf,
Exactly.
the
But
custom.
that's what don't matter which madhab you're in. You, the person doing the fatwa, has to know the cultural content and should live in it.
Yeah.
Not be an ivory tower observer. You're
And
absolutely right, and we can add that uh, to Imam Solis's idea of this new pedagogy, which is absolutely important. I want to shift a little bit, and we're going to go a little longer, or we may actually redo this because there's so many important points that
mhm.
you all have brought up, and I would be remiss if I didn't explore them and examine them, you know, to the nth degree here. But this DACA thing, um, I don't get it. You know, many of us in the African American community have been trying to be deported since we learned what deportation was, except we didn't know where we were going. It's like get out from under racism and the systemic this, that, and the other. It's like, please deport me somewhere. Um, so we have children, and I'm guessing from babies to 12, 13, somewhere in there, whose parents brought them to this country when our borders, you could, with some difficulty. I don't ever envision that there was never any difficulty, but that they could bring them here. Those children have grown up speaking bilingual, many of them. Some of them are monolingual, speaking only English. Been schooled here, learn how to taste stuff here, smell stuff here, touch stuff here, shop here. And then now you're talking about sending them back to an ancestral home that they've never been to. What is going on here?
Sadly, this is the reality for a lot of Latinos in this state. And like you said, this is horrible. Adults and children, they're in these cells in the detention centers, and a lot of them don't have soap or toothpaste, and
Yeah,
this
yeah,
is part of the reality that goes with becoming a citizen and going through that process. And not only adults and children don't have the adequate means,
yeah.
women are getting harassed, babies that have unwashed bottles, and
Right.
this is atrocious.
Dysentery. I can't imagine what's getting ready to set off down there. Are there groups of Muslims that are traveling with these Christian churches to go down there? Not traveling with them, but are groups of Muslims have we set up number one to go see and document, to go see, take pictures, and collect stories? Have we done that, or is that something we still need to do?
There's there's plenty of organizations here in South America, in California and Southern California, where they're going out there and they're still fighting for the cause. However, the the cause that's at the moment is the Black Lives Matter movement. So a lot of Latinos, we're 100% in support for the Black Lives Matter movement, and we're there supporting our brothers and sisters. So,
But all of those Spanish speaking people are Black Lives Matter too.
mhm,
So we can't become a one trick pony, pardon the expression. You can't let something fall by the wayside
yeah,
because those who want to control all of us will take advantage of that and start doing stuff behind our back.
mhm, mhm, yes, yes, yes.
Hmm.
And there's also,
Can you because I'm going to talk to you two again and harass you to pieces. Can you make sure that we know and I'm able to talk about or to some of the people who are doing that so that it gets included? You know what I'm saying? Because the bodies that are being attacked are brown and black.
mhm,
Okay. Um, we can't be this one trick. We gotta keep all the balls juggling at one time. So what have they been able to do? Because they themselves may be putting themselves at risk.
yes.
Wow. Hmm. What would you ask of the other ethnic groups of Muslims to do to support? Um, we can't run to the border, but what because we need pictures, we need stories.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that people, when they want to oppress other people, they try to do is wipe out stories and try to wipe out cultures and try to whitewash and ethnically cleanse you
Yeah,
know society and bring their narrative, and
but you
today.
can't let that happen.
Mhm.
And the only way to not let that happen is for us to get the documentation as quickly as we can. They got people living in cages under overpasses. I mean, all kinds of crazy stuff. Women, those that arrived and were pregnant, are still giving birth. What is happening? And then you got those that were sent back across the border, right? And I'm not sure if I'm remembering correctly. They were sent like in a holding station or something back across the Mexican border to wait to then fight to get lawyers to apply for asylum.
I mean, I'm reminded of the verse Allah says in the Quran, وَلَقَدْ أَكْرَمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. We have honored the children of Adam. We all the children of Adam. And all this division and all this, this extreme nationalism we see. At the end of the day, we're all human. And I was speaking before about the compassion. Where's the compassion? Where's people are so extreme that they, yes, there's law and order. We want law and order and stuff like that, and
Yeah, but that only goes one way from our current government
yeah,
administration, you know.
So okay, people are innocent, young children are innocent here, and whether a law was broken or not, does that mean you deal with people in a dehumanizing way? You dehumanize them,
And don't
again.
dehumanize a baby, for God's sakes.
وَقَدْ أَكْرَمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. We have honored the children of Adam. This is something that our religion teaches us, to honor others, even if they've committed crime, even if they did whatever, that we deal with them as a human being.
Yeah,
And
but
so,
you got to remember in your studies that there are humans and then there are jinn. And one can get the two confused because jinn masquerade as humans too. But you can tell by their actions, usually, right? What's going on there. When you start digging for a moral response and you wind up in a deep, dark hole like our president, people with no empathy, no compassion, you see, then you got to say, oh, well, maybe I thought you were human. My producers over there having a heart attack. But do you understand what I'm saying? Because many of us, the moral component has just gone dead,
Mm.
you know? And we have to stick and poke and away. For others that look human, there is no moral component. And that's something we have to acknowledge. That's just me. You all are younger students than I am. And you can say, I'm going to back it up, back it up.
Mhm.
But I mean, I really believe that because when I see the kind of inhuman things that are being done, I mean, how else can you talk about it? I mean, you've got 700,000 people plus being called something called DACA. You know, what the hell is that? You know, you're no longer human, you're this acronym. And that's just horrible. But so, how do you see what has recently happened in the Supreme Court? They didn't even put a good band aid on it. They told our government how to amend it to do some more damage. What do you think?
So I think there needs to be we're clouded within what's happening right now, and we're still not seeing we're not seeing clearly what needs to be achieved. Uh,
Mm,
we still, have talks about defunding the police and what that's going to look like, and other things of like police brutality. How are we going to have individuals that are targeting Latinos and blacks in the community? How are we going to have an how are we going to have a way where that doesn't happen again? So we have several issues that we're unpacking, and it's overwhelming.
now,
Uh,
let's not get overwhelmed. We can do this. I mean, you all have mastered so much in such young lives. We can do this. You
Mm.
know, one of the things I made an observation to my husband today. Have you noticed that not one either Spanish speaker or African American kid that's been brutalized by the police or man has been a member of a gang? They're not brutalizing members of what is it, M13. They're not brutalizing members of the Vice Lords here in Chicago. They're brutalizing innocent kids. Is it because gangs have guns and are likely to shoot back, stomp back, stalk back? You know, what's going on here?
yeah,
That's a good question.
Yeah, because look at who they're brutalizing. They're brutalizing our innocent.
Well, growing up, we had a term for people like that. They're called punks. They pick on the weak, and
Yeah,
they don't pick on those that might like, you know, most likely will beat them back
yeah,
or beat them
yeah.
up
Yeah.
or fight back or something to that effect.
Exactly, exactly. Because not one, I was scouring the papers, scouring the news, and that is not happening. It would be interesting if the gangs marshal to become the protection of the community. Wouldn't that be a kick? So kill each other. And wait, I won't have anybody to recruit if I keep letting this go on. So maybe I need to do something else. I'm thinking that as we have in one community in particular, yours, issues of detention camps, borders, a kind of rhetoric that is going on. The Spanish speakers are rapists and this, and that. There are all these things. Oh, but on the other hand, we need them to pick the crops, and we don't need to give them protective equipment because they're just out there picking the crops. As if they're not human beings who deserve the protection, or you won't eat. But they're just out there. Um, we have people. There is a story uh, on Netflix, a series called Dirty Money, and one of the stories, Imam Solis, I don't know if you've seen it, is about a I've not remembered the name of the valley, but it's a wine growing valley. And most of the pickers and the people who live in the small place are Spanish speakers. So Wells Fargo set up to invade them literally by saying, no, don't keep your money at home, put your money in the bank. Then it moved to, after they got the money in the bank, behind their backs, involve them in credit card schemes,
Wow.
right? So that they owed, oh, you got to watch this. They owed all of this money. They were losing their homes. I mean, all kinds of stuff. So we have a community that we as Muslims cannot let be preyed upon in that way. If we have to get all the translators we can get, to make sure that we as Muslims are a community that can name things and inform our communities in their various ethnic seatings. So tell me now, I've kind of taken you down the road and around the corner and etc. What do you want us to know? Because we got to get back to some of this history. We got to come back to what is happening regionally. And this is great because one of you is on the East Coast, one is on the West Coast. Um, the Latino Muslims in the Midwest, quote unquote, have really suffered because I think that they thought uh, that other slightly larger ethnic groups of Muslims were going to be accepting. But what they did was they made them performers. Oh, at ISNA, we're going to have a Spanish speaking section. Well, that meant the only people who came were Spanish speakers. Right? Do you see what I'm saying? And that's about as there was no cultural exchange. You know, they've been marginal actors to other plays. So we got to come back to some of this. I think it's critical, and I'm committed. And like I said, you all can come kicking and screaming. You can even fuss at me in Spanish, and I got 4 books. I will look all the words up, figure out what you're calling me. But what do we need to know? What do we need to know?
I think I think we need to have more of these conversations and then see what are the actions going to be after these conversations. What are we going to do in our communities? How is that going to look like? What is the reality of that going to look like in our communities, in the Muslim communities, in the larger communities? There's all these things that need to unravel and unpack, and I think that's what's needed.
Yeah.
Okay.
For me, I think that we need to have we come back to this concept of the muhajir and the ansar, those that
Say more to my non-Muslim, non-Arabic speaking, and plus those that think they're Muslim and are non-Arabic speaking, etc.
with muhajir, being those that migrated from Mecca to Medina with the Prophet
Yes.
Muhammad peace be upon him, and the ansar being the supporters. We really need we're really bad at helping new Muslims, to be honest. We get an F, really.
Minor.
Not every place, everywhere, in every place, but for the most part, dealing with these new Muslims, that people that come in, and many places are not welcoming, and we need to do a better job at that.
Okay, well, that kind of goes back into Imam Solis's idea of a new pedagogy. So let me ask you to make a commitment with me. Once a month, we will pursue in a stepwise fashion this new pedagogy. If we don't do anything else, we will learn how to be welcoming, and you will learn how to ask questions, bringing them from the community. Deal? Don't be smiling at me. Eid al Adha is coming up. Yes, deal?
Deal.
Because we've got to move on it. They're killing us, man. It's not something that we can put up there. Plenty of people in other communities that will join us. Trust me. If we lay out a plan where we're going to do this once a month, step by step, in that month, in the other portions of that month, we will talk back and forth on email, something, and we will get. But what we need to know is what you need, and it's not a one-way street. It's what you can give. You see what I'm saying? And I mean, we talked about that. The I don't want to call it the death mask. You don't know the trouble I went through with those masks and this celebration. And then it hit me, bang, wait a minute, there's something else going on here that I don't know. You gotta tell me you gotta share what you bring to the pot. It's not just about food, it's about so many other things. Promise. Don't do an inshallah thing on me. Promise. Inshallah, I mean, maybe, maybe not, No, I'm serious. That's how serious it is. We can't afford to lose our young people, our babies, our women, in any aspect of the community. Okay? This has been wide ranging, full of technical difficulties, but because we're coming back, we will iron out all of those. If either of you would like to contact me offline, and when this program is over, we'll talk a few minutes, please do. And thank you for bringing up that paper. And if I can catch Professor Umar, we will discuss the paper with him online. Okay. So I'm going to give my salams. Thank you very much for your time. Sorry about the technical difficulties. I tend to use the Socratic method. I will bombard you, as you both now know, so you can have your cup of coffee and be ready to go.
Thank you.
Salam alaikum.
Thank you, Frank.
Stay.
Thank you.